Our quarterback situation is we're going to camp, and right now Hank Bachmeier and Michael Kern will compete to be the starting quarterbacks. And certainly other guys can factor in there. Tyler Marzell, Jeremy Hecklinski, Charlie Gillum. Last year we ended up playing 3 quarterbacks. But, you know, we told Michael if he came back, he'd have a chance to compete for the job. We told Hank if he came to Wake Forest, he'd have a chance to compete for the job. And I see those two as the 2 primary competitors for it, but I'm not going to eliminate this early the chance that someone else could emerge.
If a year ago here you talked about the issue of tampering and people reaching out to players who weren't even in the portal. I'm curious, in the year since, better, worse, the same, and do you have any solutions to that issue?
I don't think it's better, but I think because of that, we've kind of learned that you got to get ahead of those things. So you can't wait till the season's over to start talking with your current roster about them coming back. And we started having those conversations last year in October. And we were able to have those conversations because, unlike the year before, we had a collective. So in 22, it was impossible to have those conversations because we had no collective. And so there's no point in bringing it up because it was going to end up as a negative. And then because now we had a collective, that you could have those conversations in October, November, the bye week, and now you weren't waiting till the portal to open. Because if you wait for the portal to open, it's already done. You know, like we lost a corner late this year. I mean, that thing was done before he was in. Now I think he was actually going to go to another school, and then things changed. But I just think you know what happens, and you just got to get ahead of it. And I've said this all the time, that you got to provide an experience and environment that players don't want to leave. And if they're happy and they're having success and they feel they're being taken care of, they don't listen to those phone calls.
The guys mentioned, in addition to, you know, whatever you can do money-wise and those kind of things, Taylor mentioned his internship and some of those opportunities. How big a part of that can it be?
Well, for us, we've always said that I think the Wake Forest way to be successful in college football in the Power 4 level is going to be distinctive and unique. And so because a lot of our players we get are very academically motivated, because they're very concerned with life after football, some of our players, we kept them because it just wasn't going to be a collective, but they were going to get work experience at a very high level. You know, so we have a lot of very successful Wake Forest graduates that said, listen, I'll help, but they're wired differently, that they want to give these guys life experiences. So we have a CEO that said, Taylor, come work next to me for the next 4 months. And you'll work and you'll earn money, but you're also going to learn a skill. And to me, that's a value added. You know, we did that for Devontae, we did that for Taylor. There's about 15 players on our team that was part of them coming back, is that you're going to get your degree, you're going to get a second degree, you know, the collective's involved, but we also want you to get more from this than just a paycheck. And that's, again, I think unique to Wake Forest, that we'll have probably more guys that has meaning to than probably not all college programs, but probably a great percentage of them.
Going back to the quarterback competition, and not this particular one specifically, but a quarterback competition, how difficult of a situation is that to kind of manage to make sure everybody gets the amount of reps that they need, to make sure that whoever doesn't win the competition doesn't decide he wants to transfer, and just handling that whole situation?
Well, I mean, at some point we're going to have to make a decision of who the starter is. And you know, the second that you make that decision, there's somebody who's extremely happy and there's someone who's extremely upset. And if they're not extremely upset, that's disappointing, because anybody who's competitive that doesn't get what they want should be disappointed. But then how do they respond to it? Because those decisions are never final, right? I mean, I sat there with Jamie Newman and Sam Hartman, and Jamie was excited and Sam Hartman was crushed. And it took him a few days to get over that. But then he came back a few days later, his attitude was right, and look at the career he had. You know, so those decisions are temporary. The starter hopes they're permanent, but the backup is still competing. And if we struggle, give us a reason that you're going to make it better. And I think almost every year at Wake Forest, except one, we've had to play 2 or 3 quarterbacks. I think 21 was the only season.
Last year we used 3.
We used 3, and our biggest win probably came with the 3rd. So, you know, the reality is they're probably both going to have to play. We got to get them both ready. We got to find a 3rd to get ready. But you can't control how either of them handle that when you make the decision.
Do you let them decide when the decision gets made, or do you have a certain time before the first game that we have to make this decision?
You got to make it before the first game. That's the
like a week out or 2 weeks out or 2 days out.
To me, okay, with every big decision you make in life, the first thing you have to establish is when do you have to make the decision by? And then you collect as much information as you can until you have to make the decision. Now, if there's enough information to make the decision before that deadline, then make it. If there's nothing that's going to change between then and now that's going to alter things, you make it. But I don't think you ever establish an artificial timeline to just make a decision. We're going to decide 10 days before. Like, what's the magic of 10 days? What's the magic of a week? You know, I mean, ultimately, you'd like the players to make the decision. And they make that by how they play and how they perform. Sometimes an injury makes the decision for you. You worry about all these things, and then a kid gets hurt and he can't play. So the thing will play out, and at some point we know we have to make a really hard and difficult decision that's going to affect somebody you really care about and who's very talented in a negative way. You know, but that's part of being in a leadership position, is that's why you have to make those decisions.
Dave, when you look at the fact of NIL and the transfer portal and everything that's been going on these last few years, relationship building seems to be paramount with some coaches, maybe not necessarily with others, but in your program you've had a lot of dedication, and you talked about the guys that you brought forward and how they've stayed true to you. Just what you can say about relationship building and how important that is.
I mean, at Wake Forest, we're never going to be a transactional program. We've never have been. You've never been the 5-star, the biggest stadium. Our recruiting cell is very substantive. It's very about life development, player development, relationship development. I still believe it matters. Now, I don't know if that's going to trump $1 million offer, but hopefully those things matter when the offers are competitive, right? I think we have players here that probably maybe could have got better deals if they just went to the highest bidder, but the fact that they have friendships, they have relationships, they've enjoyed our experience, you know, again, we want to create an atmosphere and environment that they're not even looking for those things because they're so happy. So I don't want to minimize. I think for us, relationships is always going to be critical to what we do.
Dave, the portal is a bit hard for you guys just with academics, getting people eligible, etc. What did you see out of the guys that you brought in? You know, also with the guys that only have 1 or 2 years, how do you get these guys that are usually key pieces up to speed so quickly?
Well, you know, Cam, I think if you look at Wake Forest and you're a Wake Forest graduate, right? So how would you feel if we brought in a player and he got 96 credits from another school and only had to take 24 credits to get the same degree that you got? Would you feel good about that? No. And so it's not just Wake Forest football and Wake Forest athletics, it's Wake Forest University. You earned your degree. And we're not going to do anything that cheapens the value of our degree. It's still a very valuable degree. And so what that does is some people perceive that as a disadvantage, and I perceive it as, okay, who can we get as transfers? We get guys who graduate from other schools with high GPAs that can get into our graduate program. And so those guys are what? Smart. Smart guys accumulate, pick things up quicker. Because we don't accept 3/4 of the credits from another school, the other guys that we can get are guys in their 1st or 2nd year from lower levels that clearly out-achieve their level. And they come from what type of schools? Highly academic schools, Georgetown, Villanova, Richmond, that we can accept all their credits. And so the reason our transfers assimilate so quickly is, for the most part, we get highly motivated, very smart transfers, and that's why we're able to get them, because they either have high enough GPAs that we can get them into our grad programs, or they're coming as undergraduate transfers because they come from highly competitive other undergraduate universities, and we're able to accept most of their credits, so they're eligible. So our disadvantages in some ways become our advantages. Branson Combs is smart. Capone Blue is smart. Hank Bachmeyer is smart. And, so that helps us.
What else caught your eye about Hank that made you think he'd be a good fit for your offense?
He did not first of all, he didn't come in asking for a guarantee. We were going to take a transfer quarterback. A lot of those guys want to be guaranteed they're the starter. And we couldn't do that because we told Michael Curran we promised him an opportunity to compete for the job. So the fact that Hank didn't want a guarantee, he wasn't entitled, he just wanted to know he'd be given a fair shot to compete for the job. And you spend, a half hour, an hour with Hank and talk football, and he's really sharp. I mean, he's been in a lot of different systems. He's played for Brian Harsin, who's an excellent offensive football coach. He played for Coach Cumbria at La Tech, who is an excellent offensive football coach. He was in good systems with good coaches. He knows football, and he's been taught very well. So we are the beneficiary of him being coached by very high-level coaches.
Dave, yesterday we heard a lot with the schools that were there, Cal and Stanford in particular, about all the preparations that are going into getting used to traveling from California out here for games out here. Have you even put any thought yet into the preparations of having to go to Stanford?
What do you think?
I'm going to guess yes, but are you willing to share what they are?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked to NFL teams that make that trip. And there's two different schools of thought, right? That you get out there 2 days in advance and you get used to the time change, or you just get out there the day before and then stay an extra day. And because we don't know when the game is, right? I don't know if that's going to be a West Coast noon kickoff or a West Coast 8 o'clock kickoff. And so because there's uncertainty with the kickoff times, we're going to go out there a day earlier, just so in case it is a night kickoff, we're not in our minds kicking off at an 11 or midnight clock. And then because we have a bye week the next week, that we're really grateful for that, we'll take the red eye back and let our kids off the next day, and then get back into the academic swing of things for Monday. So, I mean, still, even, again, college athletics, we make those decisions a lot of times at Wake based on, okay, minimal class miss time. So we want our guys back for their Monday morning classes.
Yesterday, Justin Wilcox was talking about the fact that Cal actually took over one of the biggest planes that Delta had in its service. So there's sleeper seats for the players. He talked about how comfortable they're all going to be. Is Wake giving you those kinds of accommodations?
No, we don't need that. We're not going to make that many trips. It's one trip. If ever you travel from the East Coast to the West Coast, the trip out there is always easier. The trip back is the nightmare. And on the trip back, the game's played and we're off the next week. So, one of the things that we've always done at Wake is we don't waste money. Any dollar we have, we spend responsibly, and we're not going to spend a lot of money on something that doesn't benefit our program.
Dave, how much did last year and the things that you learned from what happened change the way you're doing things? I mean, did you make any kind of tweaks? Tyler said you've done some things and learned some lessons that that you guys are using.
Yeah, I think right when you have a run of success like we did of 7 straight bowl games, and 21 and 22, at both those points, at one point in the season, we were top 10 in the country. So when things are going well, you don't want to mess with it. And then you have a thump and you go 4 and 8, and it makes you examine everything. And maybe it isn't what you did, but sometimes I think this is not acceptable as the head coach. You got to change things up to just say that we're not saying, for me to not change anything, we'd be saying, well, everything we did was correct, right? You got to accept responsibility for it too and say, okay, why were you 4 and 8? Where were the mistakes being made? And how do you do things differently to put emphasis that you're going to change and fix those things? And so, again, we don't do things radically different, but we changed our off-season program. We changed our mat drills. We changed how we practice in the spring a little bit. And I think our players noticed that it wasn't okay. This is how we're addressing these issues, and this is our points of emphasis going forward.
On defense, where did you want to see the improvement come from this year?
I think the big thing for us is just getting off the field on third down. Right? We've got to be better on third down. It's two things. We've got to give up less explosive plays. Now, we gave up about 19 less from 22 to 23, but it's still at too high of a rate. So even though it was still one of our greatest areas of improvement, it's still not at a level that we're going to be able to win double-digit games. So that's got to get better. And then when you get teams on third down, you got to get off the field. The games that we won, we were good on third downs. The games that we lost, we were awful on third downs. We have to be a more consistent third down defense.
And conversely, on offense, is the hope that more explosive plays, I guess? Or
well, it's number one, you got to stop beating yourself. So before you can go forward, you got to stop going backwards. So to me on offense, it was the turnovers, it was the sacks, it was the TFLs, the negative yardage plays. And then you can't start making more explosive until you stop going backwards. And so in that way, it's the worst offense we've had since 2015. And our negative yardage plays and sacks were back up to that level. And, and some of it was the O-line, and sometimes the quarterback held the ball too long. It's never one simple thing. It's a combination of, maybe the O-line protection wasn't good. Maybe the receiver route depth was too deep. The quarterback, you look at all the sacks and say, why did they happen? It's never one category. It's, a third of the time it was this, 20% of the time it was this, 15% of the time it was this. And, okay, you fix that, you fix that, you fix that. And if we all fix those things, those negative numbers are going to come down.
I thought one of the positives from offensively last year was DeMond Claiborne. He had some really flashes. Is he ready to do that on a consistent basis this year, or what are you expecting out of him?
Yes. I think he has a chance to be a really, really special player for us. He's got to stay healthy. He's not a finished product yet, but that is a very talented young man who is growing up every single day.
Is he going to continue to return kicks too, or just concentrate on?
Oh yeah, I mean that's like the
Virginia Tech game.
Yeah, I mean he that kickoff return kept us in that game, and the touchdown he had against Pitt, and every time he gets his hands on the ball, you just have a feeling that something special and exciting is going to happen, and I don't. We've had good tailbacks. That big play explosiveness, I don't know if we've had that since Kenneth Walker.
Do you sense that before a game is played, that the politicking for the playoff is already commenced? and if it has, do you think that kind of stuff does any good? Does it influence the committee and the selection?
I'm not in those rooms, but I don't think politicking ever hurts, right? I think a lot of things is just trying and making an effort, letting people know how important and critical it is. And, you'd like to think that, you'd like to believe that when the officials go out there and officiate a game that the crowd doesn't matter to them. And the statistics will tell you it does, right? So, human nature and the desire to be part of the consensus and be liked and be with the majority, it's part of human nature. So, they'll tell you they're locked in a room and it doesn't affect them. I think that's impossible. And so, I think we've got to fight and push for the people in our league. And, I believe Florida State last year got that was not right. To predict what their team would be based on, when their other quarterback was coming back. That was not fair. I don't control those things, but, I root for our league, I root for our conference. I like Mike Norvell. I consider him a friend, and I think he did an incredible job last year with that football team. And I think as much as you compete with these guys, to see something like that happen, you hurt for them.
Dave, I got a follow-up to that. Big picture question here for a second.
Okay. You're not going to record something that gets me in trouble.
No. Have I done that yet? Not yet.
There's always the first.
There was. We've always talked a lot about big picture stuff like that, college football, the portal, all that kind of stuff. Last week I talked to an athletic director at another ACC school who referred to you as one of the smartest guys he knows in college football and said, quote, he can do anything he wants in this game when he decides he's done coaching. Give any thought to that about taking on another role in the big picture of college football?
Well, right now I'm just trying to have a winning season at Wake Forest and make sure they allow me to continue to do the job I'm doing. But I you know, at some point way down the road, I'd love to stay involved in the game in a different role, in a different way, in adding value and helping college football. You know, I owe a lot to this sport. And it's an honor for me to represent the ACC on the AFCA board. I love working with Craig Bohl. I think Craig Bohl has done a really amazing job of our executive director. You know, the recruiting calendar was something that we all helped put together, that it's not perfect, not everybody agrees with it, but it makes a lot more sense with the college football playoffs. And you know, again, I'd love to stay involved with the game into my much later years, but at this point in my life, I still love being a head college football coach and hope to continue to do that for the foreseeable future.
Dave, you mentioned third down and getting off third downs. You lost Sean, brought in 3 corners this offseason. What does that room look like, and what are you trying to get out of it?
Well, here's what I'd say. Like, I think we're going to be in really good shape at safety. Right, by moving Evan Slocum to safety, you know, Nick Anderson, Devon Patterson, I think, is one of those young players that everyone's going to be asking about. You know, Rashawn Tung has a huge upside, and so what we really did at corner is, you know, Jamari Glasker, Capone Blue, but we wanted to add numbers and competition so that we have depth, and hopefully the cream will rise. So, you know, we didn't like losing Deshaun, but that's, again, college football in 2024. He had you know, whatever, got an offer that he didn't feel he could turn down. But I also feel good that we brought in Capone, we brought in Sedarius Kelly, we brought in Jackson Ball. So we added 3 people to that room that are older, have experience, have played a lot of football. And those transfers have been really good for us, right? You know, the Jacob Roberts and those type of people have really, really helped us. Kobe Turner, and those guys, everything we've seen from them athletically so far makes me believe that they're going to help us and give us depth.
With that experience, I know the NCAA kind of lifted coaching limits in terms of who can coach. Did that change any decisions you were making in terms of hiring for this upcoming year?
No, because our staff was set.
There's been like support staff.
Yeah, but you know, like a guy like David Elson, who's been a head coach and a defensive coordinator, now to allow him to be on the field and free up Brad Lambert a little bit, I think is really going to help us. I mean, that's a highly qualified coach that was in an analyst role that now can coach a position. And so, I mean, honestly, I feel like it feels like we are one of the few schools in the country following that role. And so, you know, to me it's not being enforced. Why is it a rule? I just felt we were at such a disadvantage because we were following the rule. I mean, the amount of people I've interviewed over the years who are analysts that were showing me their individual drills at practice. I just think it's, again, we don't have as many as others, but at least now we're all playing by the same rules. So I think that was a great change.
When you look at the fact that this conference being built from the Carolinas out, and then seeing over the years the Syracuses and the Boston Colleges, the Miamis, and now looking at the West Coast, how would you define what this ACC is now becoming? Because you talked about getting multiple spots in the college football playoff. What is the resume? What is the portfolio, so to speak?
Well, I think the ACC is still a very unique conference because of the makeup of the schools, right? I think right now college football has become very much professionalized, and I still think that we're a conference that the graduation rates, the academics, the life experiences matter, even though I think those value systems seem to be mocked. I think when our commissioner gets up and says those things, that people mock him for it or like look at it as so idealistic. But you know, for me as someone who got into college football, I mean, I still believe in those things at Wake Forest. I mean, I think it's cool that we're in a conference with Stanford and Duke and Boston College and Virginia and North Carolina and Georgia Tech and all these other schools that are not just good football schools, but really highly respected academic institutions that our players have to go to class and they get meaningful degrees. And I would bet our graduation rates continue to set the standard for college football. Now, nobody cares about that anymore. They don't. I care about that for our program. We have a 97% graduation success rate. It's the second highest in all of college football. Nobody cares. But I care. That matters to me. And so if other people say, well, he's lost touch with the times and that's not college football now, that's fine. I sleep at night knowing that we're not using our players just to play football. That when they leave our program, they're going to have degrees. They're going to be able to get jobs after football and good jobs that they enjoy, and they're going to use their education and they're going to have options. And to me, it's still the heart and soul of what we do. Now, again, people laugh at that and mock it, but I got into this 36 years ago because I had coaches that cared about that stuff, and I continue to care about it.
Guys, we got like 3 minutes left.
Just another just big picture question. Thoughts on the transfer portal window? Is it too short, too long? Would you change it or move it at all?
I think if you look at the statistics, that most people who get into it in the first week. And so, you know, I think we'd all like to see it a little bit shorter. You know, that it went from, 60 days to 45. And I think there's talk of shortening it, but I'm not in no power to make that decision or even influence that decision. Right? The longer they are, the more uncertainty you have with your own roster. And so I think if a player wants to go into the portal, I think giving them 2 weeks is plenty of time to make that decision. I don't know why they'd need a 30-day window, and I think the longer the window is, it just encourages more tampering. You know, because if they don't get their first choice, they're able to tamper with the next choice. So if they really want to curtail tampering, it's not going to end it, but you're limiting the opportunities to do that.
Dave, a lot of talk about expansion, but for you guys, you play your first away game week 6, don't play outside of the state of North Carolina until week 8, only leave the state 3 times for games this season. Is that a benefit, do you think, just being able to stay close?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, if you had to travel somewhere to see a good friend, would you rather travel half an hour or 16 hours? You know, we're going to go somewhere and play a game, and the shorter the travel time is, always the more convenient it is.
And then, just to ask another position group question, I'm curious at wide receiver, having Taylor back, obviously, and getting Donovan back from injury, a lot of, I think, 3 freshmen coming in as well. How have you seen that kind of position group shape up?
Well, I think over the last 5, 6, 7 years at Wake, that's been one of our strongest groups. And what we've always had is we've had really good top-line kids, and we've had the next generation that's really talented, ready to go. And, you know, between Donovan, Taylor, Walker, and Horatio, I think we have really good top-line guys. And then I'm really, really excited about Deuce Alexander, Micah Mays, Jeremiah Melvin. I feel like, okay, we're going to get back on track at receiver. And, that was part of it, right? When you have Taylor Marin back, it's hard to keep everybody, because I think as guys get later in their career, they want to know they're going to play the majority of the game. And, sometimes you lose guys, but, it would have been great to have Keyshawn Williams back. But we're going to be able to play Deuce Alexander more because of that. So then when Taylor leaves and now Deuce gets all those reps, now we're in better position in 25. So it's, there's been a logjam with rosters because we're still dealing with the extra year of COVID. So, but I feel really good about the receiver room. I think the key, though, is staying healthy. if Donovan Green and Taylor Marin and Walker and Horatio and Deuce and those guys stay healthy, we have a chance to have a really good room.
Dave, you worked with Manny Diaz when he was the coach before. You didn't play him when they were here, but what was sort of your relationship with him then, as far as coaching meetings and kind of what your observations
I really
were?
like Manny. He's a good guy, smart. I just think he's a good person, and he's good for college football. I like Manny a lot. I mean, it's the year Manny got let go, I kind of reached out to him and said, hey, if we'd ever have an opportunity. And Penn State gobbled him up so quickly that's how highly he was thought of. It was after Miami. I mean, he was not. I'm sure he had 15 job offers. People who know Manny, that have worked with Manny, that have seen his teams play, have great respect for him. And I think he's a guy that does things right, and he's ethical and smart and hardworking, and so.
Did you cross paths with Bill O'Brien very much over the years?
Well, I knew Bill like from 30 years ago. I remember visiting Bill when he was the running back coach at Maryland, and I was the head coach at Fordham. So it's a small world. And so, I mean, I remember Mario Cristobal when he was a GA at Rutgers with Greg Schiano. So, I mean, I've been in the league long, and now even some of the, younger head coaches. I coached Brent Pry at Virginia Tech when he was at the University of Buffalo. So, yeah, it's good to see these guys do well, and they're good coaches. I root for them except one week that we play them.
Yeah.
So if you may say this, how much attention do you pay to Clemson and Florida State and that whole lawsuit that's going on? Not at all?
Not at all. That's for the courts. I respect and consider Mike Norvell and Dabo Sweeney friends, and I think the world of both those guys. And those things are for commissioners, athletic directors, administrators, and presidents. Those aren't issues for head football coaches.
The other issue I would ask you, sort of related to that, money has been a talking point for the ACC about revenue gaps. The success initiative that the commissioner has talked about, the idea of winning that you're already trying to do, now maybe moving the bottom line numbers. What are your thoughts about the value of that in terms of what a school can do to help itself?
I think anything the ACC can do as a conference to encourage investment in football would probably be a wise move for the league. And so whether that's creating success initiatives, that there is an investment benefit to investing in football, if that's creating some type of standard for revenue sharing that goes to football players. Clearly right now in the business of college athletics, football is the driver. And again, anything the ACC can do to encourage investment in football, I think will help the long-term viability of the conference.
Good, guys.
Thank you.